Historic Trail, part of the Southern Campaign of the American Revolution Parks Group. Acronym pending on that one. With the National Park Service. So I am the Lone Ranger for this trail. So the map that you have in front of you, the Over Mountain Victory Trail, what is this and why are we here at Fort Defiance talking about it? This is a 330-mile National Historic Trail. It extends all the way from Elkin and Wilkesboro down the Yadkin Valley to Morganton, where it joins up with a western branch that begins in Abingdon, Virginia, cuts down through Bristol, Bluff City into East Tennessee, then crosses the Blue Ridge, joins up there at Morganton, and then heads south. Heads down from Morganton, following Cane Creek, what's now kind of Highway 64, heads into Rutherfordton, then down into South Carolina. This is the story of the Kings Mountain Campaign. Now, the battle that these men were marching to, Battle of Kings Mountain, October 7th, 1780, is its own national park entity. You can visit down there. We actually just reopened our building this week at the Visitor Center, so you can check that out on Wednesdays and Thursdays. But the reason that this is a whole nother national park entity is it's such a big part of the story. This wasn't your typical two armies chasing each other that they come to a fight, or two armies kind of blunder into each other and have a battle. Half of the reason this is a patriot victory that turns the revolution towards American independence is because of this trail, because of where these men came from, how they traveled, how fast they moved. That's why it was deemed important enough in 1980 to be designated as a National Historic Trail, the first National Historic Trail in the eastern half of the U.S. So some neat trivia there. But while we're talking about William Lenoir, why are we here at Fort Defiance? When this trail began happening, when these groups of patriots began chasing after British officer Patrick Ferguson and his loyalist army, this is kind of the definition of a grassroots movement. These men are going to be these kind of local, charismatic leaders of partisan fighters, these guerrilla soldiers, these militia groups. And once it's determined that they are going to pursue Patrick Ferguson, destroy his force, word spreads like wildfire. Groups from all over the Blue Ridge, the Yadkin Valley, the South Carolina upcountry, they hear about this and they want to help. So all while they're making this journey down the trail, chasing after Patrick Ferguson, their numbers are growing. And with these numbers is William Lenoir, the future builder of Fort Defiance here after the revolution has ended. Now, at the time of our story, William Lenoir is a captain in his militia regiment under Colonel Benjamin Cleveland. If you are not familiar with the story of Ben Cleveland, we'll talk a little bit about him in our program. I hope you enjoy. He's one of my most favorite guys to talk about. Fascinating guy. Kind of a perfectly rough character, I guess we'll put it. You'll see that in a second. But he is actually the builder. William Lenoir is one of the builders of Fort Defiance, the actual first stockade, the fortification that later he gives the name to his home. So right here in the area of this hilltop, as I understand, you have this 1777 constructed fortification that his men are going to serve to help protect the local people against their neighbors, both their loyalist neighbors, British allied colonists, but also the British allied Cherokee Nation to the west. So this is going to be a place of refuge, a well-known gathering place. So once the march starts to happen to chase down Patrick Ferguson, the men gather here, they join up with this great expedition. Now, I'll leave this up to y'all. Would you like to hear Lenoir's own words about his march, or just jump into the story?
Yeah, your choice.
You ready to hear it? So it's a couple paragraphs here, and this is taken from William Lenoir's pension application submitted in the 1830s. The reason he's doing this, in the 1830s, Congress has finally opened up the pension application system to militia. Earlier, it had been just Continentals, but there were so many militiamen who had never been repaid for their service, who had never been awarded for all their sacrifice. And you have these men who either they need this help from the government, they just want to use it to get some land, or it's their widows, it's their kids. They want this help. They have to prove that you served in the war. So these men would write out these huge statements of every detail they can remember in their 70s and 80s, trying to recall who their captains were, where they met, what they did, and the level of detail in some of these is incredible. So this comes from William Lenoir's own words describing his service in the Kings Mountain campaign. In August or September 1780, he, meaning Lenoir, was ordered by Colonel Cleveland to march with his company southwardly against the British and Tories who were harassing the people to great extremities in Burke County. And Colonel Cleveland, receiving information of the encampment of about 100 Tories at Little John's meeting house, a few miles in advance of his troops, he directed him to select 25 men, well mounted, to approach the Tory camp until they fired upon him, with strict injunction to retreat without returning the fire, in order to lead the Tories into an ambush, which he, Colonel Cleveland, would form for that purpose. So shorthand, Lenoir is bait. He's going to choose 25 men to go attack this large force of loyalist militia, to allow himself to be shot at by these men, and then to draw them back into the rest of Cleveland's troops. The arrangement was countermanded by an express, which was received before the Tory camp was reached, and all the men to return except 5 to be selected by Lenoir, with whom he was to proceed to execute the original arrangement, but he found the camp abandoned. So here you have Lenoir leading 25 men into a trap. Now he's told, okay, just take 5 men into the trap and then run back to us. But by the time he gets there, the Tories are gone. This is going to be your average service for most of these backcountry partisan leaders. This kind of constant patrol, ambush, counter-ambush against their former neighbors who are supporting King George. They, however, advanced considerably farther into Burke County, where they joined a regiment from Virginia under Colonel Campbell and some militia from the northwestern side of the Blue Ridge under Colonels Sevier and Shelby, together with the militia of Burke County under Colonel Charles McDowell. That's all right, don't need that. With these reinforcements, the march was continued southwardly until reaching Rutherford County, when they were informed of the progress and advance of a large body of British and Tories commanded by Colonel Ferguson. Upon this intelligence, orders were immediately given for every man that had a horse or could procure a suitable one to be ready to march at sunrise the next morning to oppose Ferguson. There being no regular officer or even soldier, nor no militia officer above colonel, it was agreed that Colonel Campbell of Virginia should command the whole detachment. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about this in the rest of the program, but to summarize, there is no Continental Army officer with them. There is no regular army appointed in command of this expedition. They're just coming together, having to choose who's going to be in charge. Colonel William Campbell of Virginia is selected. They accordingly took up the line of march at the appointed time, leaving behind all those who had been unable to procure horses, and on the way were joined by some militia from South Carolina under the command of Colonel Williams, which augmented their number to about 700, according to the best calculation which he could make. We've actually found that to be wrong. There were a lot more of these guys. But they continued their march all day that day and all night, it being very dark and rainy. And on the next day, being October 7th, 1780, they attacked Colonel Ferguson on Kings Mountain, near the line between North and South Carolina. And after a hot engagement, which lasted about 3/4 of an hour, which we now believe is actually about 1 hour and 5 minutes, they achieved the total defeat of Colonel Ferguson and his whole army, every man of whom was in camp at the commencement of the action being either killed or taken. They have destroyed the entire loyalist force under Patrick Ferguson. We believe that to be about 1,100 loyalist troops. The best local supporters the British had are now wiped out. The killed on the side of the enemy being estimated at 250, and on the side of the Whigs, the Patriots, at 32. The remainder of the Loyalist army, remainder of the Patriot army, amounting to about 937, according to the best estimate which could be made, were detained as prisoners of war. Nope, that is Loyalists. I apologize. This is a little confusing. Well, in this action, Lenoir, he received 2 wounds from bullets, one in his side, the other in his arm, and a 3rd bullet passed through his hair above where it was tied back. A lot of lead flying around. He goes on to describe how he's going to have to guard these prisoners. There is still the main British army in Charlotte. They escort them quickly from Kings Mountain back into North Carolina to Morganton, eventually all the way to what's now Winston-Salem, the Moravian towns of Bethabara and Salem during the Revolution, and they're going to be held there for about a month. Now, Lenoir talks about this But who are some other guys that was following Lenore? I've been analyzing some of these other pension applications, and I found the names of 6 men so far. I've only analyzed about 250 of them, but of those 250, 6 specifically named Lenore here as being their captain. Elijah Vicks, Jesse Tolliver, Elijah Reynolds, Adam Crum, George Parks, William Johnson. Now let's paint a picture of these guys. At the time this is happening, Lenore is only 29 years old, a captain in his regiment. These men who served with him, 21, 22, 24, 26, young men, ideal for this type of service. And what's interesting to me, after the war, half of these men are still here in Wilkes County. The rest of them go on to Ashe County, Kentucky, Indiana, wherever they can see another opportunity for them and their families. But half of these men are going to stay here in Wilkes County. Kind of unusual to have that many. Usually these guys are all going to be going out west on the frontier to get bigger and better farms. But that brings us to the rest of our program. Lenore's own words talked about being under Benjamin Cleveland, but then they also met the Virginians. They met the other Western North Carolinians, what's now Tennessee. They met the Burke County guys. So now's when I'll turn your attention to that handout that I passed around. That first picture you're looking at should be a map of the trail. This is going to be just simple little brown, goldish brown lines going along that. The red lines one comes next. All right, so you're looking at the map of the trail. How did this all get started? When you're looking at September of 1780, the British Army is just steamrolling through South Carolina, smashing every American force that they meet, and now they're going into North Carolina. They've captured Charlotte on September 26th, which back then, not a big deal. It's like 3 buildings and a dirt crossroads, but they've taken it. They're in North Carolina. Patrick Ferguson's mission with the British is to pacify the Western Patriots. His job is to make these guys either surrender to the British or just back out of the fight. He sends a message to them saying, if you do not desist your opposition to British arms, I will cross the mountains, hang your leaders, lay waste your settlement with fire and sword. So he's hoping this will intimidate these patriots. It just makes them mad. This is when they start to organize this pursuit of Patrick Ferguson to take him out before he can attack them. Now, if you want to turn to your next page, the one with all the red lines crisscrossing it, that is going to be the jurisdiction of militia officers at the time this march happens. When these various counties are coming together, all these militia regiments are coordinating. It is a nightmare of jurisdiction. You can't tell who's going to be in command here. Of these men involved, you are looking at the North Carolinians coming from at least 9 different counties, South Carolinians from 2 different districts. The Georgians are coming as refugees, some from Georgia, some from North Carolina, where they've been hiding out for a while. And also you have the Virginians under 1 leader, but from 2 different counties there. At least 14 legally distinct areas are being represented as these troops come together. By our calculations, at one point, possibly as many as 2,800 men are involved in this growing army of patriots chasing Patrick Ferguson. So how are they going to decide who's in charge? Each group that arrives is bringing their own leader, who they think is the best, who they think should be in charge. Some of these leaders have their own personal agendas. They think, yeah, Ferguson's a good guy to attack, but we should go this way instead. So what's going to happen next, these leaders are going to have to share leadership. What they decide to do here, they have a council, they have a committee. Each decision they make is going to be agreed upon by all of these leaders until they finally choose William Campbell, the Virginian, to be their head guy. And that's against his wishes. He does not want to be in charge of this mess. Even as leader, he still says we should decide as a council what we do. He does not want all this responsibility resting on him. So let's start talking about who is actually with this army. The first image that you have of a first leader, Isaac Shelby, should be wearing a brown coat, nice little green vest underneath. Isaac Shelby is going to be your leader from just across the mountains, right there in what they would refer to as Washington County, North Carolina. At the time of this, he's 29 years old. He's about the same age as Lenore, but he's a colonel of his regiment. He's actually the son of Welsh immigrants. Not everybody was Scotch-Irish. And he came to the area there in the mountains about 1770. He gave up a family trading business in Maryland, came out to the western frontier. He serves very early on, not so much in military leadership, but kind of political, economic leadership. He becomes a surveyor. He's with the Transylvania Company in 1775, same as Daniel Boone was. He's going to be out surveying the frontier, going up into Kentucky. He really likes Kentucky, claims some of it for himself. And it's actually while he is serving up in Kentucky, he is the Continental Commander, kind of the commissioner of quartermaster's forge. So any American fort on the frontier, anything in Kentucky, Fort Pitt, way out there beyond the mountains, Isaac Shelby is in command of keeping them supplied. Now, it's while he's up there in Kentucky that he receives news of how bad the war is going here in the South, in South Carolina especially. He comes back into what's then considered North Carolina, raises his men, and he gets involved with the fighting. So what is going to bring him right up before the Kings Mountain campaign? This man has been fighting all around South Carolina already, with his 200 mountain men down here supporting the Carolinians. He's been fighting at Fort Thickety. If you've heard of this action, it's fascinating. He leads his men to the border of North South Carolina. He actually kind of locks a whole loyalist fort into surrendering. He has his 200 men come out, surround the stockade, call for them to surrender, and the entire garrison says, hey man, you got us. They surrender the entire fort, hundreds of muskets loaded, ready to go, gunpowder, ammunition is all now in the Patriots. He's going to keep fighting with Ferguson as well. Isaac Shelby's going to fight him at places like the Peach Orchard, Wofford's Iron Works, Cedar Springs, little skirmishes and clashes all over South Carolina. So Isaac Shelby has already tangled with Patrick Ferguson, his loyalists. So when he's part of this march, he's familiar with these guys, he's ready to take care of them, he knows what he's getting into. Your next officer that you have is going to be John Sevier. You're going to have his white powdered hair, his blue and buff coat on, a more military style coat. One of my favorite guys to talk about, his nickname is Nollichucky Jack. He's a little older, he's 35 years old, and also not Scotch-Irish. He's actually a descendant of French Huguenots who came to America, to the New World, to escape religious persecution in France from the Catholics. Now he comes out in about 1773. He makes his move out to the western frontier beyond where English settlement is allowed, according to the British. He's out beyond the frontier, becomes a big leading figure, and he's going to be spending most of his war fighting Indians, the Cherokee Nation. He's going to be building forts, garrisoning them, scouting and spying on the Cherokee. It's going to be most of his fighting until the summer just before Kings Mountain. That's when he's going to come into North Carolina a little bit. He's going to help pursue some Tories for a little bit, but mostly he's going to be an Indian fighter. Now, your next guy is going to be William Campbell, wearing the black cocked hat with the white trim on it. He is the Virginian. This is the man who's going to eventually lead the entire group of these over mountain men. So he's again 35 years old, a little older than the other ones. Here's our first Scotch-Irish descendant here. Now his family goes down into Western Virginia about 1767. So very early, he's moving out there to the frontier. He's the leader of his family, the leader of his region. We're going to be one of the first kind of justices of the peace, kind of magistrates out there in Fincastle County. And he's going to be fighting all over the state of Virginia. Some of his first military service is going to be to lead the western frontier of Abingdon and out there in Washington County, going all the way to Virginia Beach, all the way to Williamsburg, where he's going to help chase the royal governor, Lord Dunmore, going to chase him out of Virginia onto the safety of a British warship. While he's out there, he actually falls in love and gets married to Patrick Henry's sister, so a neat family connection there. But he comes back to defend the frontier. One of his nicknames he's going to get is the Bloody Tyrant of Washington County. This is from his pursuit of the Loyalists, the Tories, out there in Western Virginia, known for going around and very harshly putting down any attempts to oppose the Americans, to oppose the Congress. What the Tories consider scavenging for supplies, the Patriots call it a horse thief. When the Tories say that they've attacked an enemy stronghold, the Patriots say you burned a house. So when they capture these Tories, they're not viewing them as prisoners of war, they're viewing them as prisoners, as criminals, sometimes worthy of execution. So the Bloody Tyrant of Washington County, William Campbell, is going to be the big Virginia name here. Moving on to our next guy, it's going to be a black and white sketch, coming to a North Carolina name. This is going to be Charles and Joseph McDowell, the McDowell brothers. Now I have them together here with just one image. There is no image of Charles McDowell. So we're not sure what he looked like, but this image of Joseph Jr. is from later in his life. He's going to be the one that has his home later at Quaker Meadows down there in Morganton. But their military service is side by side throughout the entire war. Wherever Charles goes, his younger brother Joseph is right there with him. When Charles is a captain, Joseph is a lieutenant. When Charles is a colonel, Joseph is his major, right there at his right-hand side. Now, at the time of this fight, Charles is 37, Joseph is 24. These guys are actually sons of Irish immigrants, not the Scotch-Irish we like to think of here on the frontier, but straight from Ireland itself. Now, these guys are going to be heavily involved in service all over the colonies. These men, not only leading the local patriots in 1775, 1776, but they march against what they call the Cross Creek Expedition, the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge, way over in coastal North Carolina. The Scottish Highlanders, who are very loyal to King George out there, the McDowells go and fight against them. After that, they're involved in expeditions against the Cherokee Nation in 1776, Rutherford's expedition, which goes out the summer of 1776, just a scorched earth campaign against the Cherokee Nation, trying to attack their food stores and their homes rather than the actual Cherokee warriors themselves. So a very dark part of history there. But they're also involved against the local loyalists there in Burke County. Now these guys have been fighting in South Carolina against some of Ferguson's men. We've mentioned earlier how you had the battles at Walford's Iron Works, the Peach Orchard. These guys are also involved down there. These small skirmishes, ambushes, running fights, the McDowells have been involved there as well. Well, also, they go all the way down to the Savannah River on the Georgia border at one point and oppose the regular British Army who are coming up through Georgia. So here you have some guys that have fought every person you can think of. They fought against their local neighbors. They fought against the Scottish Loyalists, the Cherokee Nation, British regulars, you name it, the McDowells have fought against them. And leading right up to the Kings Mountain campaign, the McDowells are going to be the last ones to make a stand against Ferguson before the Over-Mountain men begin to gather. Right down the road here, down 64, the Battle of Cane Creek, nice little historical marker there beside the road. It's Charles McDowell who's leading these men up through Burke County, who tries to stop Patrick Ferguson, but he's surprised, he's flanked, he's chased off of his little ridge line, so kind of a small skirmish that happens there. This is going to be the last real opposition against Patrick Ferguson, and McDowell flees all the way across the mountains into what's now Tennessee with his men. So when the Battle of Cane Creek happens, Charles and Joseph McDowell, they flee. Ferguson believes all is well. He believes he has pacified most of the patriots here in North Carolina. So it's going to really surprise him when these guys later gather and begin to chase him in just another couple weeks. So that's the McDowell brothers. Moving on to my favorite guy. Get some Yadkin River going on here. It's going to be a portrait of Benjamin Cleveland riding on his white horse. This is Benjamin Cleveland, Old Roundabout. It's one of his nicknames later in life. One of my favorite nicknames for this guy, the Terror of the Tories. That should tell you about his military service. This guy is just going around. If he hears that you're a loyalist, you will be pacified is a word for it. William Lenore even talks about while serving with Cleveland, the Tories called his guys Cleveland's Devils, or Cleveland's Bulldogs. Lenore talks about while he's serving with Cleveland, they capture a gathering of 7 loyalists. Real scary, 7 guys got together, but of those 7, they hang 2 of them. The other 5, they tie to a tree and whip and allow them to go home. This is the kind of suppression that these patriots are having to resort to keep the loyalists from taking up arms. That is how vicious the fighting is here in the backcountry during the American Revolution. And Benjamin Cleveland, he's a little overzealous when it comes to this. Twice during the war, his own side, the North Carolina Assembly, brings him up on murder charges, but they later find him innocent and just a little bit overzealous in protecting liberty. But again, he's been all over North Carolina. He makes his way over to the coast to put down the Scottish Highlanders at Moores Creek, but he misses the battle, but he tried to get there. Then he comes back to the central North Carolina, and he goes to fight against the Cherokee to the west. He's part of that big expedition out there, building forts, garrisoning forts, patrolling for any Indian raiding parties. It's going to be a lot of their service for this guy. But then again, the terror of the Tories all around this area of Wilkes County, the Yadkin River. He's going to be the real authority, which is why Lenore is going to be following him. Let's see, moving on to nice little painting there. It's kind of got some lights in the sky, some militia looking over their shoulder. Talking about Edward Lacy. Again, no image survives of what Edward Lacy, a South Carolinian, what he looks like. However, he was involved at the battle depicted in this painting, the Battle of Huck's Defeat, down south of kind of Rock Hill, York, South Carolina, that area there. It was notable because as these guys gathered in the pre-dawn hours to ambush a loyalist force, they saw the Northern Lights. They talk about it in their pension application. Not sure why, but that's what's depicted in that painting there. But Edward Lacy, he's 38 years old, South Carolinian. A great story for this guy. When he was a boy, we don't know how old he was, but legend has it that a gypsy woman told his fortune when he was living up in Pennsylvania and said that he would be in many battles but never be injured. And she was right. All through his life, Edward Lacy served in the French and Indian War as a 13-year-old pack horseman. So just guiding the horse loaded with goods and supplies. He's going to run away from home. He's going to come here to South Carolina. He's going to serve all throughout the Revolution under the Gamecock, Thomas Sumter. That's who the USC Gamecocks are named after. But he's going to be serving with this guy, battles all over the Cherokee Campaign in 1776, Huck's Defeat, Rocky Mount, Hanging Rock, Fishing Creek. A lot of victories, a lot of defeats. But he is never even injured, never even wounded his entire military career. During the last final, I guess you can call it the last push, as they're chasing Patrick Ferguson, Edward Lacy is going to be the one to bring news of Ferguson's location to the Over-Mountain men. Lacy and his South Carolinians are in a different camp somewhere nearby in the area of kind of what's now Shelby, North Carolina, Cherry Hill. And when a local man comes through, says, "Hey, I've heard you're looking for Ferguson. I know where his camp is. This is how you find him." Lacy, in the middle of the night, tears off, finds the Over-Mountain men, brings them the news. They join up the next day. They get Ferguson the day after that. So if it was not for Lacy, the whole campaign may have failed. And our last man, our last patriot leader here is going to be a picture of two reenactors standing there talking. No, I changed it on yours. I apologize. It's a picture of two cannons mounted on rocks. This is the grave marker of Colonel/General James Williams. He's currently buried in Gaffney, South Carolina, the highest ranking Patriot casualty of the Battle of Kings Mountain. Mortally wounded, he dies the next day, and he was later reinterred there near some of the county administration buildings there in Gaffney. But I say Colonel/General because this is where you get some of the politics of this infighting, how bitter the feuds were between different Patriot leaders. James Williams, he goes to take the North Carolina Assembly news of a great victory. They think, hey, great job. Here's a commission as a brigadier general. So he comes down into South Carolina, this little piece of paper in his hand, walks into the camp of his rival South Carolina officer, Thomas Sumter, says, hey, look at this. I'm in charge now. Give me your men, your horses, and your supplies. You work for me. Sumter says, I don't think so. He refuses. He goes off to complain to the assembly to get a higher promotion, so he'll be in charge. So this kind of inner backfighting like this usually plagues any time partisans try to cooperate. But James Williams, kind of who was he? 39 years old. He is actually a son of English immigrants, so you kind of got the big spectrum going on here. He moves down to North Carolina. We don't know a lot about his early life, but just before the war, by 1773, he has done very well for himself. He's down in what is the 96th district of South Carolina, kind of the far western part of it. He is a mill owner. He's a merchant. He's a planter. He has huge plantations. And with this kind of political power, he becomes a leading patriot figure politically, militarily. So he's involved in the fighting, 75, 76, local kind of campaigns. Some of his big stuff is actually going to be going down to Georgia and helping to stop the regular British Army down there, the Battle of Briar Creek, Battle of Stono Ferry, which did not go well for the Americans, but he was there, he's got this experience with him, but also he's trying to be with the militia. He again is feuding with Thomas Sumter. He thinks they should fight to the west of the Broad River. Thomas Sumter says no, the east of the Broad River, and that's the reason they hate each other. So with these two guys, you are looking at, again, fighting over who has command at Huck's Defeat, Rocky Mount, Hanging Rock, Carey's Ford, Fishing Creek. Numerous clashes all over the South Carolina battlefield. So what I'm trying to get at here, these are experienced men. Their military service has not just been in their home districts. It has been all over the state, and sometimes all over the South, from what's now Tennessee, what's now Wilmington, down to Savannah, all the way up to Jamestown. When you get these commanders together, when they come and share command, you have a think tank, you have a council, a committee of officers that has more military service than any British officer that you could hope to fight against. These guys have fought against every kind of British soldier, militia, Indians, regulars. They know what they're doing, but they share command. They realize that what is in front of them, it's not just the fate of their county at stake, it's the fate of their country. So by agreeing to work together, to share command, to agree on decisions, this is what makes the whole campaign, the whole march, the whole trail, the whole Battle of Kings Mountain possible, is their willingness to work together. Yes, they were partisan leaders. They had their own command. They were these, the big dog in their own area. But by working together, they made an impact that sent ripples throughout the nation. When Kings Mountain happens, Patrick Ferguson is killed. His army is destroyed. Thomas Jefferson said this was the turn of the tide of success in the American Revolution. Even British officers, General Sir Henry Clinton, said that Kings Mountain was the principal link in the chain of evils that led to the loss of America. So if it had not been for that cooperation, it would not have been possible. William Lenore was there, with the march, with Cleveland, at the battle. 2 gunshot wounds, almost through the back of his head there, cutting through his hair. He was there for all of it. So I want to thank you guys for coming out. If you would like to learn more about the Kings Mountain Campaign, Over Mountain Victory Trail, myself and Volunteer Lamar will be happy to talk with you about it. We're here for another hour until 2 o'clock. Also, there's an organization out there who is our principal partner in protecting this trail, sharing this story. They're called the Over Mountain Victory Trail Association. Mary, raise your hand. Local chapter representatives right here. If you want to get some more information about how to join this group, she can get you set up with that. But again, thank you guys for coming out here to Fort Defiance, hearing this story, and hope you enjoy.
That was great.
Wonderful.